Elena Carter sat by the window, watching the world outside. Children ran across the street, laughing as they chased each other. A man jogged past, sweat glistening on his forehead. A woman in heels walked confidently, talking on her phone. Elena could do none of these things. For 18 years, she had been trapped in a wheelchair. Her legs were nothing more than lifeless limbs, refusing to obey her mind. Doctors had told her she would never walk. The muscles in her legs had never developed properly. There was no cure, no treatment, just a lifetime of sitting while the world moved without her. She turned away from the window. What was the point of watching something she could never have? Her room was filled with books, but not the usual kind. Elena didn't like stories about magic or romance. She liked books about science and technology, about people who had changed the world. She read about scientists who built rockets, doctors who created life-saving machines, and engineers who turned impossible dreams into reality. But no matter how much she read, none of them had ever created something that could make her walk. Elena sighed and moved to her desk, pushing her wheelchair forward. On the desk was a letter, an invitation from a man named Dr. Oran. The letter read, "I have been working on something revolutionary. A new technology that could change your life. If you are willing to take a risk, I can help you walk." At first, Elena thought it was a cruel joke. She had received empty promises before. Miracle cures, fake treatments, expensive therapies that led to nothing but disappointment. But Dr. Orion wasn't some random person. She had searched his name online. He was a brilliant scientist known for developing advanced robotic limbs for soldiers who had lost their legs. His inventions had changed lives before. So why was he reaching out to her? A soft knock on the door pulled Elena from her thoughts. Her mother, Sarah, entered, carrying a cup of tea. She placed it gently on the table and sat beside her daughter. "Elena," her mother said softly, "are you really thinking about this?" Elena didn't answer right away. She looked at the letter, then at her mother. "I don't know," she admitted. "What if it's real?" Sarah sighed. "And what if it's not? You've been hurt before, honey." Elena knew her mother meant well. Every time she got her hopes up, reality came crashing down, leaving her heart heavier than before. But something about this letter felt different. "Mom," she said, gripping the armrests of her wheelchair, "I can't keep living like this. If there's even a tiny chance that this could work, I have to try." Her mother looked at her, sadness in her eyes. Then she reached out and held Elena's hands. "If this is what you want," Sarah whispered, "then I will support you. But please be careful." Elena nodded, her heart pounding. Was this the beginning of something incredible, or just another cruel disappointment? She would soon find out. Elena's hands trembled as she held the letter. The words burned in her mind. A new technology that could change your life. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie. Something that only happened to other people, never to her. But what if this was real? She stared at the computer screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Dr. Orion's name filled the search bar. There were dozens of articles about him. Stories of soldiers who had lost their limbs, only to regain their independence thanks to his robotic prosthetics. One article, in particular, caught her attention. Dr. Orion is leading a new wave of bionics, combining artificial intelligence with human movement. His latest project, still under wraps, is said to be his most ambitious yet. Elena's heart pounded. Could she be part of this project? She clicked on a video interview. The screen flickered, and a man in his late 40s appeared. His sharp blue eyes were filled with intensity and passion. "People think the human body has limits," he said, his voice steady, confident. "But I don't believe in limits. I believe in possibilities." Elena swallowed hard. Possibilities. For 18 years, she had lived without them. Her whole life had been about adjusting, learning to move without legs, learning to accept stares, learning to ignore pity. But now, for the first time, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. She took a deep breath and typed a response. Dr. Orion, my name is Elena Carter. I received your letter. I want to know more. Her finger hovered over the send button. Once she pressed it, there was no turning back. With a final breath, she clicked. Sent. The reply came faster than she expected. Elena, I'm glad you reached out. Can you come to my lab tomorrow? She stared at the words. Tomorrow. That was too soon. She wasn't ready. But then again, would she ever be? She turned to her mother, who had been watching quietly from across the room. He wants to meet, Elena whispered. Sarah's lips pressed together. Are you sure about this? Elena didn't hesitate. Yes. Her mother exhaled deeply, then nodded. Then let's go. The next morning, Elena barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining what would happen next. Would Dr. Orion take one look at her and decide she wasn't a good candidate? Would he tell her it had all been a mistake? By sunrise, her nerves were on edge. Her mother helped her into the car, and they drove toward the city. The lab was massive, a futuristic glass building that looked more like something from a space station than a medical facility. Elena felt small in front of it. A receptionist guided them inside. The air smelled of metal and antiseptic. Machines hummed softly in the background, and everywhere, people in white lab coats moved with purpose. Then the door at the end of the hall opened. Dr. Orion stepped out. He was taller than Elena expected, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes sharp as they studied her. Elena, he said, offering his hand. She reached out, shaking it. His grip was firm, steady, like a man who had never doubted a single thing in his life. I've been waiting to meet you, he said. Elena's heart pounded. So, he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. Are you ready to walk? Elena's breath caught in her throat. Are you ready to walk? The words echoed in her mind. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life. But now that she was here, standing in front of Dr. Orion, the reality of it all felt overwhelming. She swallowed hard and nodded. I think so. Dr. Orion studied her for a moment, then motioned for her to follow. Her mother pushed her wheelchair down the long, bright hallway, the sound of her wheels humming against the sleek tile floor. Elena's pulse quickened as they reached a large door with a biometric scanner. Dr. Orion pressed his hand against the screen, and with a soft peep, the door slid open. What she saw inside took her breath away. The lab was unlike anything she had ever seen. Rows of robotic arms moved with precision, assembling sleek metal parts. Monitors displayed holographic images of legs, some with wires and circuits, others that looked nearly human. There were scientists working at stations, programming and fine-tuning devices that seemed straight out of a sci-fi movie. Elena's heart pounded. Was this where her future would change? Dr. Orion turned to her, his eyes full of excitement. Elena, what you're about to experience is something the world has never seen before. Her fingers gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. What exactly is this technology? Dr. Orion motioned toward a nearby workstation. A transparent glass case sat on the table, holding what looked like a pair of legs, but they weren't ordinary prosthetics. They gleamed under the bright lab lights, their surface smooth and metallic, with joints that looked eerily natural. These, Dr. Orion said, are the first fully integrated AI-powered bionic legs, not just prosthetics. These are an extension of your body. They will connect directly to your nervous system and respond to your thoughts as if they were your real legs. Elena stared, unable to speak. You won't need a remote. No buttons, no manual adjustments. You will simply think about walking, and you will walk. A shiver ran through her. Could this really be possible? She glanced at her mother, who looked just as stunned as she felt. How? How does it work? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Orion pulled up a holographic diagram, showing a glowing image of the human nervous system. Your brain already sends signals to your legs, even if they don't respond. Our technology intercepts those signals and translates them into movement. These legs will become a part of you." Alina's breath quickened. "And you think they'll work on me?" Dr. Orion smiled. "I don't think. I know." She wanted to believe him, desperately. But a small voice in her mind whispered doubts. What if it failed? What if it hurt? What if she wasn't strong enough? As if sensing her fear, Dr. Orion crouched beside her wheelchair. "Alina, I won't lie to you. This won't be easy. Your body has never walked before. You will have to train your brain and muscles in ways you never have. It will be exhausting. It will hurt." She swallowed. But he continued, "If you are willing to fight for this, I promise we will get you on your feet." Alina felt something inside her shift. For 18 years, she had been told what she couldn't do. This was the first time someone had looked her in the eyes and told her what she could. She clenched her fists. "I want to try," she said firmly. Dr. Orion nodded. "Then let's begin." The next few hours were a blur of tests. They attached electrodes to her skin, mapping her brain's electrical activity. A machine scanned her body, analyzing her skeletal structure, nerve responses, and muscle density. Scientists recorded data, making calculations she didn't understand. And then, at last, came the moment of truth. Dr. Orion stood before her, holding the bionic legs in his hands. "Are you ready?" Alina's heart pounded. She took a deep breath and nodded. Alina's fingers curled around the edges of her wheelchair. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of it. The bionic legs lay on a sleek metal table before her, gleaming under the laboratory lights. They looked almost too perfect, too advanced to belong to her. Could they really become a part of her body? Dr. Orion stood beside the table, watching her reaction closely. "Alina, this is going to be the most difficult thing you've ever done. But if you trust the process, I promise you, these legs will change everything." Her mother stood nearby, hands clasped tightly together, fear and hope battling in her eyes. Alina inhaled sharply and nodded. "I'm ready." Dr. Orion gestured to a nearby chair, more advanced than any hospital equipment she had ever seen. "We need to connect the neural interface first. This will allow the legs to sync with your brain signals." Her heart pounded as the team of scientists moved in, their hands precise, their movements practiced. They carefully lifted her from her wheelchair onto the chair, securing her in place. The moment the electrodes touched her skin, a strange tingling sensation ran up her spine. It wasn't painful, just different. A large screen in front of her flickered to life, displaying a visual representation of her nervous system. Glowing blue lines branched out from her spinal cord, stopping abruptly at her thighs where her legs should have been. "This," Dr. Orion said, pointing at the screen, "is where your body has stopped communicating. Your brain still sends signals, but there's nothing there to receive them. The bionic legs will act as that receiver." Alina swallowed. "And once they're connected," Dr. Orion's eyes gleamed, "then you will take your first step." The scientists moved with precision, attaching the sleek metal limbs to her body. They were warm, not cold like she expected, heated by a system designed to mimic human body temperature. Alina felt a jolt of panic. What if this didn't work? What if she couldn't handle it? She pushed the doubts away. No, she had made it this far. She wasn't backing down now. A scientist tapped on a tablet, and the room filled with a soft hum. A light pulse ran through her body, and suddenly, the blue lines on the screen lit up, extending past her thighs, down into the bionic legs. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. She felt something. Not exactly like real legs, but awareness. A presence where before there had been nothing. Her mother gripped her hand. "Alina." Alina blinked back the sting of tears. I can feel them." Dr. Orion smiled. "That's just the beginning. Now let's see if you can move them." Her breath hitched. The room fell silent. Every eye was on her. She focused, sending a thought down to where her legs should be. Move. Move. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a twitch, a barely noticeable movement, but it was real. The scientists erupted in excitement. Elena's pulse skyrocketed. She had moved her leg. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. Dr. Orion crouched beside her, his voice steady. Elena, listen to me. I know this feels overwhelming, but I need you to push past the fear. You're in control now. Your body wants to walk. Trust it. She took a deep, shaky breath. Trust. That was something she had never been able to do, with her own body, with people, with life itself. But maybe, just maybe, she could try. She clenched her fists, focused every ounce of her willpower, and tried again. This time, her right foot lifted off the ground. Her mother gasped. One of the scientists covered their mouth in shock. Dr. Orion's smile widened. Now, he said softly, stand up. Elena's heart pounded so hard it felt like it would shatter. Her body shook. Her mind screamed that this was impossible. But she wasn't listening to doubt anymore. She gritted her teeth and pushed herself upward. The world seemed to slow. The chair beneath her disappeared. And for the first time in 18 years, Elena was standing. Elena stood. For a moment, time itself froze. The air in the lab felt thick, heavy with the weight of history being made. Scientists stared, wide-eyed and unblinking. Her mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Orion's breath hitched, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something close to awe. But for Elena, none of it mattered. She was standing. After 18 years in a wheelchair, her legs, her new, artificial, gleaming bionic legs, held her weight. She was afraid to breathe, terrified that the moment she did, something would snap, that this fragile miracle would shatter into a cruel joke. Her knees trembled. A rush of emotion swelled inside her, a chaotic storm of fear, joy, disbelief, and hope. Dr. Orion stepped forward carefully, as if afraid any sudden movement might startle her. His voice was calm but firm. You're doing it, Elena. You're standing. A shaky laugh escaped her lips. I am. The words tasted surreal, like they belonged to someone else. She looked down at her legs. Her legs. The sleek black metal shimmered under the fluorescent lights, the joints and actuators hidden beneath a synthetic layer that mimicked human skin. They didn't look like flesh and bone, but they felt alive. Her mother sobbed. My baby. Elena turned to her, eyes burning. Mom, she whispered, I think I can take a step. A heavy silence fell over the room. No one moved. No one even breathed. Dr. Orion met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Are you sure? She wasn't. Not even a little. But a voice inside her, stronger than doubt, said, yes. She wanted this. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being carried, pushed, or lifted. She had control. She wasn't a patient. She wasn't disabled. She was a fighter. And she was done waiting. A scientist quickly adjusted a support system behind her, a precaution. If she fell, the system would catch her. Elena hated that. She didn't want a safety net. But she also wasn't reckless. She inhaled sharply, her fingers curled into fists. Then, she lifted her right foot. It felt alien, like trying to move a part of someone else's body. The connection between her brain and the bionic legs was still new, still learning. Her foot hovered in the air for a moment. Then she set it down. The world didn't end. She didn't collapse. She had taken a step. A choked gasp echoed through the room. Her mother whispered her name like a prayer. Dr. Orion's lips parted, his expression somewhere between scientific fascination and personal pride. But Elena barely heard them. She had walked. Just one step. But it was hers. She gritted her teeth, determined. One step wasn't enough. She lifted her other foot, and took another, and another. By the fourth step, Her legs wobbled, her balance uncertain. The bionic limbs adjusted, stabilizing her, but her mind still struggled to accept the sensation. She wasn't used to this. She had never done this. She had to keep going. She needed to know this was real. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The effort of thinking, of commanding her own body, was overwhelming. Her breath came in sharp gasps. Her fingers twitched. Her knees buckled. And she fell. A scientist lunged forward to catch her, but she stopped him with a raised hand. "No," she gasped, breathless. "Let me." She wanted to do this on her own. Trembling, she pushed herself up. Her muscles, what little she had left after years of atrophy, burned in protest. But she refused to quit. Pain was temporary. Fear was temporary. But this was her new life. She pressed her hands against the ground, gritted her teeth, and forced her body upward. Dr. Orion watched, saying nothing. By the time she stood again, her entire body was drenched in sweat. Her mother was openly weeping now. Elena turned, looking at them all. Again. Dr. Orion's lips curled into a slow, proud smile. Again, he agreed. And this time, she didn't just walk. She ran. Elena's heart pounded as she sprinted across the lab. The bionic legs responded with flawless precision, every motion smooth, every step powerful. For the first time in her life, she felt unstoppable. The scientists gasped in disbelief. Some scrambled to take notes, others simply stared, too stunned to react. Her mother clutched her chest, eyes wide with shock and overwhelming joy. Dr. Orion's expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with pride. Elena barely noticed any of them. The world blurred around her. All she could feel was freedom. For years, she had watched others run, jump, dance, things she never imagined she could do. She had been a prisoner in her own body. But now she was more than human. She pushed harder, her speed increasing. The sensors in her legs adapted, sensing perfectly with her movements. The floor beneath her blurred. Her muscles ached, not from weakness, but from effort. "I can do this." She didn't just want to walk. She wanted to live. She reached the far end of the lab and skidded to a halt, spinning around. The momentum nearly threw her off balance, but the bionic legs adjusted instantly. Dr. Orion took a step forward, eyes locked onto her. "How does it feel?" Elena's breath came in short gasps, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She ran a trembling hand through her sweat-dampened hair. She smiled. "Like I was meant for this." Her mother sobbed into her hands. The room was silent, filled with nothing but the hum of the machines and the sound of Elena's ragged breathing. Then, Dr. Orion nodded. "Good," he said, a strange intensity in his voice. Elena narrowed her eyes. There was something in his tone, something unreadable. She had felt it before, like he was hiding something. Something about these legs, about her. Elena's fingers clenched into fists. "What's next?" she asked. Dr. Orion hesitated. Then, slowly, he turned to one of the scientists and gave a curt nod. A button was pressed. A wall slid open. And behind it, a massive training arena was revealed. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The room was huge, lined with obstacles, high walls, moving platforms, mechanical dummies. It looked like a military testing ground. A chill ran down her spine. She turned back to Dr. Orion. "What is this?" He crossed his arms. "Your next challenge." Elena's stomach twisted. She had expected tests, but not this. This wasn't just about learning to walk. This was about something else. Something bigger. She glanced at her mother, searching for an answer, but the woman looked just as confused as she felt. Her gut told her something was wrong. Her legs weren't just medical miracles. They were weapons. Dr. Orion's eyes gleamed. "If you can master this course, you'll prove that these legs aren't just an experiment." Elena swallowed hard. Prove? To who? Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She had spent her whole life fighting to be normal. Now she wasn't normal. She was something else entirely. And she had no idea what that meant. She took a slow step forward toward the arena. Her legs hummed with power. She had come too far to turn back now. No matter what Dr. Orion was planning, she was ready. Elena stood at the edge of the massive training arena, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. The world around her felt surreal, as if she had stepped into a completely different reality. She had spent 18 years in a wheelchair, dreaming of walking. But this was something else entirely. The air inside the training facility was cold, sterile, and filled with the low hum of machinery. High walls surrounded the space, lined with surveillance cameras and automated turrets that tracked her every movement. Massive mechanical obstacles loomed ahead, moving platforms, laser-guided barriers, spinning blades, and combat dummies that looked far too lifelike. She swallowed hard. This wasn't rehabilitation. This was a test she had never agreed to. Elena glanced at Dr. Orion, who stood behind a reinforced glass wall, watching her with calculating eyes. His hands were clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. "Elena," he said, his voice echoing through the intercom, "this is your final challenge." Final. Her jaw clenched. She had only just begun to understand her new abilities. Now they wanted to push her to the limit. "Why?" she asked, her voice firm. Dr. Orion's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. "Because you are no longer just human. These legs, your legs, are proof that the future isn't bound by biology. You are living proof of what technology can achieve." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She had been so focused on learning to walk again, on feeling free, that she hadn't stopped to think about what they saw her as. Not just a girl who had spent her life in a wheelchair. Not just a medical breakthrough. But a weapon. Her fingers curled into fists. Dr. Orion continued, "This course is designed to assess your reflexes, speed, and endurance. But most importantly, it will test your mind. Will you push forward, even when the odds are stacked against you? Or will you break?" Elena gritted her teeth. She had already spent 18 years feeling helpless, trapped in a body that refused to move. She had already broken and rebuilt herself from the ground up. She wasn't about to stop now. She took a deep breath, forcing the fear down. "Let's do this," she said. Dr. Orion nodded. "Begin." A loud alarm blared, and the entire arena came to life. The floor shifted beneath her, morphing into a moving conveyor belt. Elena's instincts kicked in, and she sprinted forward, her bionic legs adjusting instantly. The first set of obstacles rose before her, massive spinning blades that rotated at terrifying speeds. Elena didn't hesitate. She jumped. Her legs reacted faster than her brain, launching her high into the air. She twisted mid-flight, dodging the deadly blades, and landed smoothly on the other side. She barely had time to catch her breath before the floor split apart, revealing a massive pit filled with electrified panels. No way out. No bridge. Just a sheer drop. Elena's breath hitched. Then she noticed the solution. The walls had tiny footholds, barely big enough to grip. Her hands trembled. She had never been able to climb before. She had spent years watching others do it, always wishing she could. She wasn't about to hesitate now. Summoning all her courage, she leaped toward the wall. Her fingers barely found purchase, but her legs compensated, gripping the surface with inhuman precision. She scrambled upwards, her body moving like it had been trained for this. Somewhere above, she heard gasps from the scientists. They hadn't expected her to adapt this fast. She reached the top and vaulted over the ledge, just as a mechanical arm swung toward her. Elena ducked, barely missing the impact. The arm retracted, then came at her again, faster this time. She didn't just dodge. She grabbed it. Her enhanced grip held firm as she swung herself onto the robotic arm, balancing for a split second before using its momentum to launch herself forward. She soared through the air and crashed down on the final platform. Silence. The alarms shut off. The arena powered down. Elena lay there, her chest rising and falling, her mind spinning. She had done it. Slowly, she pushed herself up and turned to face Dr. Oran. He was smiling. But not just any smile. A smile of satisfaction. Like he had just proven a theory. Like everything had gone exactly as he expected. Elena's stomach twisted. She wasn't just part of an experiment. She was the experiment. And whatever came next, she wasn't sure she was ready for it.